Okay, so we're in our last content unit. I'm recording again on my phone because, again, I can't record in Canvas. I'm hoping that we will get this figured out soon, but for this semester, this is where we're at. So, last content unit, and I hope that you will kind of see that we're in a point now where we're kind of coming full circle. Right? We started out the semester talking about super strong imperial societies, right? I mean, Spain and Portugal, yes, they were the strongholds of Europe, but if you think about it, really, the strong imperial societies were the Aztecs, the Incas, kind of the Mayans. They were falling a little bit, and then we got into all this clash and conflict that created changes in classes, in societies, in ways of ruling, in systems, in race and ethnicity. I mean, think about it. We have entirely new ethnic groups that were created out of this clash and conquest that we started with in the beginning. Cultural identities. And then we went through looking at the evolution of these things, right? So, from starting with these strong imperial societies and where they were all coming from, we went into changes in culture and societies and politics, looking at the way families were structured, at the way inheritance was gained, at how you could classify yourself as a person, like quote unquote a person, right? Depending upon your color, your race, your ethnicity, your language, so many things, right? And now it's all going to change again because we're getting into a crisis period, which is what we started with. We started with a crisis period, and now we're doing it again. The crisis this time, so we're really down to 2 empires. 3 if you want to separate out the American Empire from the others, but really it's the Spanish Empire and the Portuguese Empire, because their holdings are what we're discussing in this class. Their holdings in the Americas, right? So the indigenous empires are gone. And in some cases, even some of the indigenous identities are gone, although not completely. We saw this with the Tupac Amaru revolt, right? Not all indigenous identity is gone. And you're going to see this in the independence movements also, that some of the indigenous identities prevails, and that's what focuses some of these movements. But now we're at the end, right? We're going to see how crises elsewhere are going to impact change in colonial Spanish and Portuguese America. Now, when we're talking about crises elsewhere, I want you to really think about crises in Europe, right? Yes, the American Revolution, as we call it, came before that, before their independence movements, but I really want you to look at and think about how it was the European crises and the Latin American crises that would focus their independence movements, how it would push to bring change again, because that's what they looked towards. Yes, a little bit of the American Revolution, but it wasn't such an impetus. That was a very different type of society. We're talking about Anglo-Saxon society as compared to a Latino Romance society. It was different. And they were much, much more impacted by what was going on in Europe than what was happening to the north of them, right? All right, so in this unit, we're looking at periods of crises, we're looking at the wars of independence, we're looking at the legacy, the so what, right? What has changed? Has anything changed? Obviously, we're not getting into all of that. We're not going into the national period. National period means period of national state development, which we also had after our War of Independence, the period of development of nationhood, because the class is called Conquest and Empire. So once the empire's done, we're done. So what? Once independence is done, we're done. But I want you to think about how this would lead to new national identities, new cultural identities, the rise of new political systems, the rise of new political feelings, the rise of new statehood and state identity, where this would all come from these changes. Okay? A very big thing I want you to think about is the fact that I have been saying over and over again the independence wars, right? And I want you to think about how and why Latin Americans classify what they went through as wars of independence. They don't call them revolutions. And this is actually very intentional on the part of most people in Latin America. So think about how and why they gained independence. What would be their legacy and why? Why don't they call it independence? Why don't they call it revolutions? Why is it just wars of independence? And in fact, many Latin Americans think it's a misnomer that we call ours a revolution. So we're going to be thinking a little bit about what does it mean to have a revolution? What is really revolutionary, right? Won't go too far into it, again, like I said, because we don't get into the national period, but it's something to definitely consider. Okay, so for this unit, you have 3 chapters in your colonial Latin America textbook. I had originally decided to assign 1 chapter of documents in the colonial lives until I read back through it and decided it wasn't 100% applicable and you have a lot going on, so I decided not to do it. You will have 2 quizzes, not 3. All right, so you'll have a quiz on chapter 11 and chapter 12, and then you'll have a discussion forum, and the discussion forum will incorporate chapter 13, the epilogue, right? So what you're going to be thinking about for the discussion forum is incorporating what comes next in with what you've learned about from the independence movements and the change. All right, so 2 quizzes, 1 discussion. And then you have your focus on your research project, and I will put up the final assignment for that as it's in the syllabus, as I've sent out messages, as I've commented on your updates. Some of you are writing a research paper. And again, I know some of you are confused by the cross-listed course because in the modules it says S290, but that is how I had to cross-list it. If you go to your schedule that you signed up for, you will see what class you signed up for. About half of you are signed up for the history section, which is a 300 level history course. And for that, we write research papers. And that was in the syllabus, and I have said that over and over again, right? The rest of you are in the Spanish culture section, which is a 200 level section. And for that, you will do a research PowerPoint, but the research is expected to be the same. The quality of research, the amount of sources, the citing, the bibliography, expectations are the same. The only difference is whether you're putting things on PowerPoint slides or if you're writing them in a paper. All right, so if you have any questions, let me know, and let's get started with our last content unit.